The Holy Gospel according to St. John. Jesus said, "As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Abide in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. I have said these things to you so that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be complete. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. No one has greater love than this, than to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends if you do what I command you. I do not call you servants any longer, because the servant does not know what the master is doing. But I have called you friends, because I have made known to you everything that I have heard from my Father. You did not choose me, but I chose you. And I appointed you to go and bear fruit that will last, so that the Father will give you whatever you ask him in my name. I am giving you these commands so that you may love one another." The Gospel of our Lord. Praise to you, Lord Christ. Congregation may be seated. I wonder if anyone at home stood up. We'll have to find out.
Someone raised their hand.
Someone raised their hand and said, "Cool." Grace and peace to you from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ.
Amen.
Good morning.
Good morning.
When Megan and I first visited St. Paul's all the way back in March or April of 2016, we got a picture in front of the many love signs that are throughout the state of Virginia. And it's always been one of my favorite things about Virginia. Ohio always had like boring slogans. West Virginia had wild and wonderful. That was cool. Virginia is for lovers. I always liked it. What a great slogan. And the Virginia Synod has added a twist to the saying. So if you go to a youth gathering or other Synod events, you may see a shirt that says, "Virginia is for Lutherans." But today I would argue that they mean the same thing. Because if we cannot claim to be a Christian unless we have love in our hearts. You see, love is a tricky thing. How many songs, poems, movies, stories, tales have been written about love? And how many of those have ruined it? These stories, the movies, the romantic films, they portray love as this magical and ethereal thing that sweeps you off your feet, carries you blissfully through everything. That's not really how it works, though, is it? It's not love. Because love isn't an emotion. It's a decision. In order to love, you need to actively choose love. We pick up today's gospel reading directly where we left off last week. We had verses 1 through 8 last Sunday, and today we finish with the section of verses 9 through 17. And it's a beautiful collection of verses. As we near the end of the Gospel of John, Jesus is giving the disciples this very long section of advice on how they need to live their lives when he is gone. We had a very interesting conversation about this text on Monday, and so I'll share some of those highlights with you. And the first is that there seems to be some qualifications on how to love, right? It seems that we cannot just throw the word around. If we are to love, we need to abide in God. Because without doing that, without showing love through obedience to the commandments, we aren't really loving. So in order to abide in love, we must follow the commandments of God. And this can seem a little strange to us because, like I said, the movie industry has ruined how we understand love. But as someone said Monday, love isn't an emotion, it's an action. Love is a verb. That's why my favorite verse is Colossians 3:14. It reads, "Above all, clothe yourself with love, which binds everything together in perfect harmony." I like to think of that image of actively putting on love as the way we live our lives. It's a decision. Just as we can walk out of the door and forget our coat, likewise we can forget to put on love. I get it though. The die-hard Lutherans among you are probably pointing out that this smells a lot like works righteousness, Pastor. But bear with me. We're not doing this because we're trying to earn our way in, but out of thanks because of what God has already done. Obeying the commandments can seem like a weird way to show love. But I think our brother Martin Luther can help us out with this one. After our first reading, obeying the commandments can seem pretty simple, right? God tells us not to kill, so we don't kill. Check. But Jesus raises the bar and says that even anger in our hearts can break the commandment. And we can wiggle our way out of that one by just not caring about someone, right? But Luther switches things around. Because it isn't enough to not do something, but we actively need to support and protect our neighbor, he argues. Since you're all good Lutherans, and I'm sure you already are finishing this quote from the Small Catechism along with me, I'll read it anyway. The fifth commandment, you shall not murder. What does this mean? We are to fear and love God so that we neither endanger or harm the lives of our neighbors, but instead help and support them in all of life's needs. That's a much different take on love. It's not enough to not hurt someone, but we are called to actively and concretely support them. And so when we read the beginning of our lesson, we can see that Jesus is calling us to live out our love for others. Take another look at verse 11. Jesus says, I have said these things to you so that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be complete. It's like Jesus is telling us that if we go throughout life without giving love, we'll be empty. In order for love to work, there needs to be a relationship. We need to risk and give to another person. I think we've all run across someone who was so angry that they seemed like a burnt out husk, right? It was as if all the rage had burned them up. And so they could give nothing. But what we see here in verse 11 is a call to live our lives with joy. True joy. And that joy can only come about when we actively work to love one another, when we invest in the relationships around us, when we do more than just ignore a problem, when we actively work to do it, solve it. There's a lot of problems in the world. And they can seem so overwhelming, and they are. But our empathy shows the character of our faith. We cannot ignore them. It can be easy to think that we can just let it slide because it's someone else's problem. But as the gospel has shown, everyone is our neighbor. We finish today with the words from the greatest show ever made, Doctor Who. The 12th Doctor's words before leaving are a wonderful summary on how to begin living this love in our life. He tells us to never be cruel, never be cowardly. Remember, hate is always foolish, and love is always wise. Always try to be nice, but never fail to be kind. Laugh hard, run fast, and be kind. Amen.